Thank you.
Good? You good?
Yes, I am. Thanks.
All right. And do you need to rename you, or do you want me to rename you?
I will. Headquarters. I will be
All right.
via headquarters too. Thanks, buddy.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Mark, I have to open a second computer if we have people in the room to do a presentation, to do and that way people can see the WebEx. So as soon as somebody show up, I might have to open the WebEx in the second computer.
Stephen, do we not have, we don't get.
That will come down,
Okay, then I can.
but I have to open a second computer
Oh, for it to come down and project.
to project.
Got it,
Let
got
me
it.
come down.
Okay,
And I have the equipment here that's,
okay.
it's gone, so we're using an additional five
Yeah,
axes.
yeah. And again,
Anna, did you have a question?
Hi. Can you guys hear me?
Uh-huh. Did you have a question?
I do. Is there a video option that I just don't see?
There is, if you're a panelist. If you're just an attendee, you won't be able to turn on your camera.
Okay, I am a panelist, but I don't see any option to turn it on.
Oh, yeah, because you're not promoted to panelist yet.
Oh, okay.
So hold on here.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Are you able to hear and see me?
Yes, ma'am. Welcome.
Welcome. Is it clear, the sound?
Uh-huh.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we only have one NMAC person in attendance so far?
So far.
So far. We have 10 minutes?
9 minutes and 49 seconds.
Love it.
Yes, I'm
you.
refreshing our attendees every few seconds. So.
Yeah, I've got that too. They just don't look like they're on. So, okay, we'll start the, Macaulay, can you hear me?
Hold on.
Okay, I don't see her on either. Oh, she's in the attendees.
Yeah.
You can elevate her. We'll go ahead and start phone calls.
She should be able to hear you now.
Yep,
She should have been
thank
able
you.
to hear you before.
Yeah.
There's Dr. Jane.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, sure can.
Good.
Perfect. I'll start calling in, or actually, I'm going to start calling right now and sending emails.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you, Macaulay.
Uh-huh.
Can you remind me how many people we need for a quorum?
I believe it is 3. Let me
Oh,
check
okay.
just to make sure. So I believe we do have quorum.
It sounded like staffers were reaching out to the other folks, so give them a couple minutes.
Yeah, we have a couple minutes,
Okay.
but we can start and take roll call and do meeting minutes and stuff like that before we get into the guts of everything. So if that does end up being an issue, let me check here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we actually need 4. And it looks like we've got Kim, Kenneth, Jenna. So we just need one more person. And then we'll be able to go ahead and start. Okay, so
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
we can.
Okay, it's a little echoey, but I just want to let you know Lilith is on her way, so she will not be able to join until about 9:10.
Okay,
So we're asking, oh, it's already up. The slide to be posted that will start at
Yes.
9:15.
perfect. Sounds great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ruth.
Good morning. How is everyone?
All is well. And
Good.
we have quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. It's just, some mornings there more things happen and
Yeah, it's okay.
so sorry about that.
No worries. You're fine.
Okay, Jenna, everybody's on that will be on, so we'll be ready to start in 2 minutes.
Great, thanks.
Okay, it is 9:15. You can go ahead and open up.
Okay. Hi, all. Should we call the meeting to order and take a roll call?
Yes, please.
I'm here, Jenna. Dr. James.
Sure.
Our new member, Kim Doe.
Morning here.
Lilith. Is Lilith here yet? Okay, I can't
Yes,
hear
she
them.
is.
And Dr. Milky. How do you
Lilith,
say your last name, Ruth? Did I say that correctly? Oops, you're muted. Ruth, we cannot hear you.
yeah, Ruth, you're muted.
Oh, I was,
and then-
I must have been muted. So yes, it's Milky, like Milky Way candy bar, unless you
Okay.
speak German. And if you're German, you say it a different way. So that's okay.
And then did we get a verbal confirmation from Lilith? I can see her. I don't remember if I was able to hear her.
I'm
Oh.
here. I'm present. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. So we have a quorum.
Board moderator, will you open up with agenda item 2, please?
Good morning. This is the BRN moderator. I will be moderating the meeting. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When the committee reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, the question and answer feature will be turned on, and members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by inserting the phrase, "I would like to make a comment," in the question box, which is typically in the lower right of your screen. I will then call on the individual and unmute their microphone. The individual will have 2 minutes to make their comments. I will not give a warning as your time approaches. I will mute your microphone and will announce that your time has exceeded the time allotted. I will then proceed to the next member of the public who has a comment. We will also query the in-person BRN location, meeting location. Right now, I am informed that there are no representatives present right now. Please note that the question and answer feature is being used only as a means for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. When your turn comes, you'll be prompted to unmute. If the question can be answered, the committee will respond accordingly. When making your comment, speak about anything you believe is important that the members to know. Remember, committee members cannot address any item not on the agenda. Items not in the agenda at that moment, items that you would like to add to a future meeting, or items that will be discussed later on in the agenda will be discussed at their correct times during the meeting. I'll provide a brief reminder of this approach at the start of each public comment item. Finally, when committee members or BRN staff are not speaking, I would like to remind them to mute their microphone. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will mute your microphone automatically.
We can move to agenda item 3.0.
Thank you.
Public comments for items not on the agenda, items for future agenda.
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I would like to give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Bianca Stepani would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Bianca, go ahead.
Yes, hi, good morning. I'm actually a member of the public who actually has reported to registered nurses in the past due to their drug usage and their volatile behavior. And the matter has been looked into, but unfortunately, I keep getting letters that state that the matter has been closed. And it actually took me getting arrested, going to jail, and actually having one of the investigators from the Board of Registered Nursing to show up and indicate that the nurse that was investigated actually had been caught being positive for marijuana, and she was still operating as a registered nurse. Her license has been revoked at this point, but there is another registered nurse who still keeps operating despite her known drug usage. And what I would like to ask the board is if they can maybe look into the enforcement division or call for strict measures such as when they're up for their license renewal, if they are subjected to some sort of random drug test or even a psychological evaluation to make sure that these nurses are operating from a place of integrity and helping keep the public safe as well. That's all I had to say. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Paris Maloof Burry would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Real quick before Paris begins, I just want to make a reminder to the committees that items for public comment that are not on the agenda, there are only 2 things that a committee can do. And one is that make a motion to add that to a future agenda, or 2, remain silent. Since this is about possibly licensing, enforcement, intervention, specifically related to RNs, you could consider agendaizing that for a specific conversation around nurse midwives, or you can remain quiet and we'll just take that in and we can manage that on our end as well. I do want to let the caller know that we do have options that are available to help registered nurses or advanced practice nurses. They can reach out to us. We do have an intervention program that is for nurses whose competency may be impaired due to the abuse of alcohol or other drugs or due to mental illness. And that is a focused on rehabilitating them and returning them to the practice of nursing so that it doesn't endanger the public health and safety. We do not do drug testing or any type as a form of license renewal or even license granting. So just provide that quick clarification, and then now we can go on to the next public comment, please.
As you are aware, SB 1375 amended our statute effective January 2023, allowing nurse midwives to provide first trimester abortion care without physician supervision and without standardized procedures. It said this bill would revise those provisions by requiring, in order to perform abortion by aspiration techniques, a person with a license or certificate to practice as a nurse practitioner practicing pursuant to a standardized procedure, to practice as a certified nurse midwife, no standardized procedure referenced here, or to practice as a qualified nurse practitioner functioning pursuant to certain advanced practice provisions to achieve clinical competency by successfully completing requisite training as specified in performing these procedures, as provided by certain board-approved programs, courses, and trainings. While the language of this bill still requires nurse practitioners to practice under standardized procedures, it does not require this for CNMs or for qualified nurse practitioners functioning pursuant to certain advanced practice provisions. As you should also be aware, pursuant to SB 667, which took effect January 2024, nurse midwives no longer required to have standardized procedures. It said this bill would revise and recast those provisions to remove references to standardized procedures or protocols and patient-specific protocols. Business and Professions Code 2746.5 is clear that certificate to practice nurse midwifery authorizes the holder to attend cases of lowest pregnancy, childbirth, and provide prenatal care, intrapartum care, postpartum care, including immediate care of the newborn, intraconception care, family planning care, which includes abortion, and care for common gynecologic conditions consistent with the core competencies for basic midwifery practice adopted by the American College of Nurse Midwives or its successor national professional organization as approved by the board. It's further specified under BMP 2746.6, the board shall not suspend or revoke a certificate to practice nurse midwifery solely for the performing of an abortion if the holder performed the abortion in accordance with the provisions of this chapter and the Reproductive Privacy Act. My request is that you please update the regulations on the BRN website and clarify that we no longer, as nurse midwives, require standardized procedures for any of these things, and that abortion in the first trimester, whether via medication or aspiration, is included within our independent scope, provided that we've completed the requisite training. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
That updating of the FAQs and such is scheduled for the future agenda item discussion. So we will be able to have further discussion about that when we get to that section.
The Chair Shaw Batista, there are no other public requests for comments on the WebEx. We have no in-person representation in our location in BRN headquarters. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And am I remembering that this is also an opportunity for committee members to propose any future agenda items? Anyone have anything to add? Okay.
Good morning.
Okay. Kim?
Kim Doe, I wanted to request a future item to better understand the BRN process for approving nurse midwifery education programs in the state.
So
I was hoping that that's something that we could maybe have a staff presentation on at a future meeting.
So just for quick clarification, the BRN does not approve certified nurse midwife programs in our state. That is not a requirement at this point, and we do not do that.
Is this a new practice?
No, that is ongoing practice. We have some educational standards, but we do not approve nurse midwife programs. The only advanced practice program that we do approve and are required in law to approve are nurse practitioner programs in the state of California.
Yeah.
Nurse midwife, nurse, clinical nurse specialist, and CRNA programs do not require BRN approval, and we do not offer those.
Speaking from personal experience, I prepared and submitted a BRN approval application probably about 7 years ago, had an NAC meeting. I'm curious what happened. Why was that required at the time and what changed?
It was not required. It was a volunteer offering where the school would reach out to the BRN and ask us to review their program to see if it meets the licensing requirements for nurse midwives in our state. And at that point, we would review the program as requested by the program and say that it met the licensing requirements in our state. And that is it. It is not a BRN approval process. And we could meet offline on this, and we could choose to agendaize this in the future. If a clear place for you to get some background is to look at the California Code of Regulations. Nurse Practitioners Article 8 talks about program approval, and it is in regulation. And Article 6 under nurse midwives does not talk about any program approval. If we are to do anything in the BRN, we have to do it under regulatory and statutory authority. We cannot just do it. So there was a process previously where nurse midwife programs could voluntarily ask us to review their curriculum and standards to see if they are able to be, their graduates can be licensed in our state. So that's what that process is.
Do we need a motion to add an agenda item for future meetings?
We don't need a motion. You can make a motion. We do solicit, and I know that Kim, this is your first time on the NMAC committee. What we typically do is as it gets close to the agenda setting for the next meeting is Macaulay Fusarins, the chief of licensing, sends an email out to all of the members soliciting agenda items. For consideration. And then we do meet with the chair and vice chair of the committee, along with legal and myself and chief of licensing Macaulay to set the next agenda for the next meeting. So we do take into consideration everybody's request. There are some things that we don't bring forward based on request because they're outside of our jurisdiction, but there are items that are within the jurisdiction that we're able to agendaize and have for future discussion on that.
I'd like to get a bit more clarification as I'm trying to explore the appropriate agenda item to request. So
Okay.
if the BRN is not if the BRN is not required to approve, this is a voluntary step, it is still an option if the midwifery program decides that they want their licensees to if they want their program to be recognized, then that will create a different application pathway for the certificates, the new certificates. Is that right? Because there's pathway where anyone who's graduated from a California BRN approved program, they have a distinct registration pathway for their new certificate.
Possibly. So I suggest that we meet offline to have a further discussion on that. Kim, you and I can meet. We can even have legal there if you want to. We can explore that, and then you can decide what you want to ask as an agenda item so that we can put it forward. And we can put it forward with Jenna and stuff when we're talking about creating the next agenda.
I'm happy to do that. I'd like to just check with my committee members. I know that we're limited in the number of discussions we can have outside of this committee with multiple committee members. Is there anyone else who feels like that discussion would be important to have within the committee space versus a separate meeting between myself and the executive director?
And just so you know, we can do both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I think having the conversation with you would help you to look at the way that you want the agenda item requested. And then we can still put the agenda item forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to, as Kim suggested, have a staff overview of the relationship between the BRN and midwifery education in California as a place to start. Does that make sense, Kim?
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful.
Can you, I missed excuse me, I missed the beginning of what your original request was. I'm
happy to repeat it.
We can't have it, but I actually didn't catch what it is exactly you wanted placed on the agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Lilith. My question or my request on the agenda initially was to have BRN staff discuss the process for BRN approval of nurse midwifery education programs in the state of California. My understanding previously had been that these were required approvals, but as we're hearing in this discussion, it is a voluntary approval. But there is still an approval process, and I think having as an agenda item in the future, clarification about how that approval takes place. If BRN staff could explain that, present that to the committee, that would be, I think, very helpful for our learning.
Yeah, and then we can actually talk about steps forward if that's something that you would want to set. If you want to set a requirement forward, we would have to do it in regulations, and we would have to make that a scheduled process, and we would set that up. And so we would have to look at similar regulations that we have for nurse practitioners. Additionally, you would consider adding the licensing aspect to that for conversation, because you were talking about method 1 and method 2, et cetera. And so that would be something why you and I would need to meet offline to discuss the totality of that, to ensure that when we do agendaize it, we agendaize it properly to include all of the items that you are wanting to discuss in order for that to be able to have an appropriate agenda to be in compliance with Bagley-Keene. So when we write the agenda, you have to be very clear on what needs to be discussed so that the public knows whether or not it's an item they want to show up for. So if you just wanted to talk about approval process and not talk about the licensing process, then we would agendaize just the approval process. If you wanted to talk about the approval process and the licensing process, we would have to agendaize and add licensing. If you would want to explore the creation of regulations to support that licensing process as well as that review process, then we would have to agendaize that, which is why I'm asking that we take this offline to have a more robust discussion, Kim. And then once I'm able to explain that full process to you, you will then be able to choose which and how you want it agendized so that you can accurately get the information out and all your questions answered. And so I think we still need to have that beginning conversation so that I can ensure that what you're asking for is able to be put forth correctly so that we can have a robust discussion around that and include all the items that need to be touched on.
Thank you. I feel pretty clear at this point that my agenda item request would be on the approval process and gaining insight into just the approval process at this point in time.
Okay, and you had mentioned in the conversation the licensing aspect where they are able to sit for method 1. If you do not want to discuss that, then we can pull that out and not include that.
Correct. I don't think we need to discuss the licensing necessarily, but the approval process itself.
Okay. And just for clarification, it's a review process, not an approval process, because we do not approve the California nurse midwife programs. We review them to see that they meet the licensing requirements. So we can agendaize that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've pulled up my 2018 letter from the BRN, and its subject is continual approval visit to nurse midwifery program. So I'm just using the language that I've seen before.
I know, and my job since 2020 of taking this position is provide clarification on what our laws say, which mean that some of our prior practices may not have been accurately portrayed or communicated. So we do need to be in alignment with our laws, and we are working diligently to update our website to reflect that and change the language that we use around those processes.
Great. So it sounds like we're going to discuss that review process.
Sounds
or
great.
agendaize it rather. Anything more to say on this topic? Okay, I actually had 2 future agenda items to suggest as well. I've really appreciated the new standing agenda item to report out on disciplinary actions, and I was hoping that other folks might find it interesting to have similar standing agenda items, one related to a report out on pending or new legislation that would impact nurse midwives. I know that the BRN annually publishes legislative updates early in the following year. But I wondered if it might be possible for us to hear about that on more of a real-time basis. So that's number one. I don't know if anyone else is interested in that or if that seems feasible.
So we typically don't put them as a standing item because what we have to do is itemize each bill separately, right? That has to be in the agenda that says we are going to talk about this bill. If we don't put down the bill number and author, etc., then we're not able to have that conversation because
Okay.
somebody might want to show up for a conversation about SB 667, but may not be interested in showing up about SB 1237, right? So
Got
we
it.
have to put that
So perhaps the
specifically down.
placeholder could just be legislative update, and when we actually publish the agendas, we can include any bills that will be referenced, and if there aren't any, then we can say as such in that section of the standing agenda. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm seeing some head nods, and since we don't need a motion, I'm just going to keep going.
And then just to clarify, Jenna, that the nurse midwife bills that we're able to have consideration and conversation on are ones within the jurisdiction of the BRN. And
Got
so that's
Okay.
sometimes not necessarily clear. And so
Yeah, just whatever you were
may
going to
bring
put in
those
the end
forward
of
and we
year
might
update.
say, yeah, and we might say that lives with CDPH. We're not able to have that kind of conversation. So we'll work with you guys that when it's brought forward.
Great. I was also wondering if it might be helpful to have a standing agenda item that is a report out, potentially by a staffer or by the chair, to outline what, if any, outreach we've received from the public. We've long talked about wanting to sort of track trends in what people are interested in and haven't really come up with a successful mechanism yet. So if we, for example, had a standing agenda item of a chair's message, I could work with staffers to compile that list and break it down thematically to present to the group briefly in a future meeting.
So
my understanding is that this happens in other similar committees or councils, not necessarily per BRN, but like through the medical board in California. And so that's where the idea came from.
So clarify staffers. Are you talking about your co-advisory committees, or are you
No, I
talking
meant
about
actually BRN
public?
staff, because whoever is responsible for the email that public are directed to use when they have issues or concerns pertaining to NMAC. I don't know if that's Macaulay or in Macaulay's team.
Macaulay monitors that email box specifically for NMAC. We don't receive, public doesn't use that email. That's an email that's used typically with the advisory committee members here.
Okay.
It's not that they can't use it, it's that they haven't used it for outreach.
Okay. Well, maybe that could be part of our discussion, is what is the best mechanism. And as we've discussed in prior meetings, the public has periodically outreached to specific individual committee members. And so part of the ask would also be, I guess, to share that information with the staffer or with me prior to the meeting so that it can be included.
So not with you. So that's kind of where I was trying to get to.
Perfect.
We've asked routinely that if you guys get outreach, if you guys have agenda items, Macaulay does do a reach out prior, and all of that stuff is taken in, and we can do that and build the agenda based on those needs that are being brought forward. The thing that, I mean, just to be honest, with NMAC, we don't get a lot of nurse midwife reach out at all.
Okay.
In any manner whatsoever. We're happy to receive that. We're open to receive that. We have various ways that people can reach out to the board. My email's online, Macaulay's email's online. We have a contact us page that people utilize to reach out. Our public information unit receives phone calls, and we have a correspondence unit that reaches out to. We don't receive nurse midwife inquiries. That's not something that is something that we deal with on a regular and consistent basis. There may be a one-off, like once a year.
Well, that'll
But
make the
we do a
report out
reach
very
out.
easy
So,
then.
right. So if you guys are receiving those, we would love to compile those. We do an email reach out. We can absolutely add items that are, again, under the jurisdiction of the BRN. So when you do your report out, what we'll have to get from you is what you believe you're going to report out on.
Correct.
Because
Yeah.
we can't just
Well in
do
advance.
a basic, Jenna's going to report out on stakeholder conversations, right?
No,
So what
my
you'll have
idea
to
would
tell
be
us are
that
what
we
the
would meet
items-
to discuss as regular meeting planning, and that I would provide any
Yep.
materials well in advance for review and approval before the meeting. And it may be that there's
before
not a
the
whole lot to
posting
be
of the
said,
agenda.
but I did want to just bring that up because I'm not clear that all committee members would have known to escalate every single issue that's raised. And I guess that's kind of my ask, if you hear from public or stakeholder organizations, is to make sure that you forward that to Macaulay for inclusion in this potentially new standing agenda item. Does anyone else think that would be useful, just as a way to keep us on track and try to collate any information from the public's interests that we receive, however we receive it?
Through using Macaulay, just so we don't violate Bagley-Keene, yes?
Yeah.
And ensuring that items that will be discussed and shared out have to be known prior to posting of the agenda so that we can put it out there in compliance with Bagley-Keene for that clarity aspect, and also understanding that it has to be under the jurisdiction of the BRN.
Okay.
I'm in support of that idea, Jenna. I think it's helpful to have that agendized.
Great. And maybe it's just external accountability for myself to keep myself on track, but I think it would be mutually beneficial. All right.
May I speak? I'm physically holding my hand up.
Please.
So not to overwhelm with agenda items, but I was thinking, since we're coming into are we almost at getting to the 5-year mark of SB 20 or 1237, that we actually have an agenda item to talk about the status of independent practice of nurse midwives in California and how we can assess that. I ask both, and I see Lilith. So Lilith and I are in a hospital practice, which is, those of you here and the public, most of midwifery practice occurs in hospitals, particularly in California. We have a hospital that is very open to entertaining how independent practice as a midwife would look in a hospital setting. So I know that was 2 different things that I said, but I would be interested in, number one, us talking about, maybe again, I'm not going to talk about the solution because I know that's not part of the agenda item. I would love to talk about what is the status of the outcome of our bill, number one. And then number 2, operationally, is it happening anywhere in California in a hospital setting? Because we've actually talked about the barriers in hospital settings at probably 2 years ago during the summer meeting, as I recall. So those are kind of a part 1, part 2 of the same agenda, status of midwifery independent practice in California.
So I have a couple.
Would it be appropriate to ask the scope of practice or regs subcommittee to present on this topic?
Yeah, so I am on the subcommittee of the regulations, and I did meet with Dr. James about this. And so
I need to pause, you guys, sorry. We have an agenda item for reporting out of subcommittees. So we need to save that for the agenda item where we're discussing that.
So my question then is, if we want to add something to the agenda, do we we can bring it up at that time and still add it as an agenda item, or does it have to be done now?
If it's part of the subcommittee, there
Uh-huh.
is, it's discussion and possible action. And so your action could be to make a motion based on that during that time frame.
Okay.
Additionally, the other option is, other than utilizing this public comment time, is you guys can respond to the emails that are sent out by Macaulay Busarin soliciting agenda items and reaching out and having those discussions too, so that we can do that agenda planning ahead of time. The other thing that I do need to gently redirect on to make sure that to respond to Ruth's idea of putting this out is to really make sure we draw that line very clearly, that we are a licensing agency and not an employment agency. We do not collect employment data. That is not something that we do. And even though we can license you and say you have an independent practice, we cannot force any healthcare agencies to employ you in that way. So we may have to meet with you, Ruth, separately, Macaulay, myself, and potentially Reza, our legal counsel, to have a more robust discussion on what you're specifically wanting to put forward, so that we could then look to see how we can put that under the jurisdiction of the BRN, so that we can talk about that. Because what we cannot talk about is privileging, all of that kind of stuff that goes on that's underneath CDPH. We may be able to reach out to CDPH if they have somebody that could come in and speak to that. If you're looking for specific workforce data, that's not something that lives with BRN, but we could reach out to HCI and see if that's something that they had a presentation that they could do on workforce data. So the same ask that I have for Kim to meet separately, to have a really robust discussion to understand what you guys want to put forward, and so that we can brainstorm how to get that forward where it is under the alignment of BRN. I would love to have that same conversation with you, Ruth, to solicit that information, to be able to write an agenda item that accurately reflects what you guys need and is underneath the guidelines and the jurisdiction of what BRN can do. So I would like to have you guys watch out for an email from Macaulay. Macaulay will work to set that up with you, both of you guys separately, so that we can have that conversation. And then it looks like, Lilith, when you come to your report out on the subcommittees, we might be doing the same thing unless we're able to clarify that. Agenda item planning is a large process, and there are a lot of laws and things that have to be considered and followed, which is why we do have legal counsel sitting in on our agenda planning meetings majority of the time. So I want to make
That's
sure
why I
that
was
that is
also
handled appropriately.
suggesting that maybe it go to a subcommittee to do the kind of work that you are suggesting. I mean, if Ruth wants to tackle that independently, great. But we do have the scope and regulation subcommittees that could work with the BRN to request some of these potential presentations mentioned. I think CDPH and potentially also reach out to the CNMA, who may have the data that the BRN does not collect.
Is, again, meeting with legal, ensuring that it's within our jurisdiction. So we will have to do that. Now, you can do that as part of the subcommittee. Yes, 100%. That's what subcommittees are there for. But it is important to have the meeting so that we can have that discussion and we can set an agenda item that's appropriate.
This is Reza, legal counsel. I just wanted to say a real quick word. I'm supportive, happy to be involved in, whatever meetings take place, and later on if there's a discussion at a future committee meeting to help get some clarification around this issue. The one kind of, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this, where we're in the public comment and future agenda items. So the one caveat, though, that just comes to mind is with the term independent practice, just be a little cautious in how you use the phrase. And I say that based somewhat on experience that I think in other areas of advanced practice nursing, we've seen just confusion caused over the use of what I consider, I get it, and sometimes you kind of just need a shorthand way of conveying what you mean, and independent practice is an easy term to throw around, but there's no such thing as true full independent practice that has no limits, obviously. And so it's a little oversimplified, and it runs the risk of possibly causing some confusion amongst those who are not necessarily day in, day out, unlike you all, looking at the statutes and regs and, totally versed in the scope of practice and all that. So a little caveat there. I'm not saying not to use that language, but just understand that it's, there's no such thing as total independent.
Well, I was just reading.
And that's something we can help clarify the boundaries of.
I was just reading from the FAQs. The first sentence says, "What is CNM's independent scope of practice?" So that I'm being very black and white.
Yeah.
From the
right within our independent scope, but I do think it's actually potentially misleading because the independent scope is low risk, and when we leave the discussion to that, we fail to acknowledge that through the development of policies with collaborative physicians, our scope is actually beyond just that normal low risk.
Good point.
But we could probably talk a little bit about that in the FAQ section, or the updates post SB 667 section.
Absolutely can. So
Good
we'll
point.
save that for that agenda item, please.
Yeah, and when we get there, it's just the risk I don't want is for others to be confused that without those policies and protocols, or however it's phrased in statute, that you can exceed in that low risk. But yeah, we'll get there, and thank you for that.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. Any other items for future agendas? We usually skip this part pretty quickly, but not today. Seeing none, I think we can move on. Did anyone have a chance to review the last meeting minutes? Does anyone have a motion to approve?
I'm unable to make a motion because I wasn't present, but I did want to comment that at the top of the meeting minutes, the location, I think there's a typo, and it says that this was the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee meeting. That just needs to be updated.
Got it. Yep, in the location paragraph.
Good catch. I don't know how that got through several layers of review.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Presumably with that correction there.
Yeah, Jenna, if you can.
With that correction.
Yes, thank you.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second. I'll second. This is Ruth.
Okay. Meeting minutes are, let's take a vote on whether or not to approve the meeting minutes.
Before doing that, presume it's unlikely that there's any public comment, but we'll have to turn to public.
Got it. Is there any public comment on the last meeting's minutes that were provided in the materials for today's meeting?
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Shaw Batista, there are no public requests for comments on the WebEx. We have no in-person representation in our location in BRN HQ. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we can vote on whether to approve last meeting's minutes. All in favor say aye.
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 It looks like the meeting minutes are approved.
Technicality,
nays?
sorry. We're supposed to do roll call voting.
Oh, okay.
I know it's
I will do it in the order I see you guys on screen.
4 or 5 of us, but yeah.
Dr. James.
I approve.
Dr. Milky.
Aye. Yes.
Lilith.
I approve.
And Kim.
Abstain.
Oh, that's right. All right. I think that's everybody here. So the meeting minutes are approved. And we're moving on to discussion and possible action regarding our subcommittees. To start off this discussion, we have a vacancy in the Public Engagement and Website Subcommittee. We also have a new member. So is it appropriate to have a discussion about subcommittee memberships at this point, given the broad agenda item?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Great. I was hoping that Kim would be very interested in the Nurse Midwifery Education Subcommittee as a CNM educator. But I don't know if you're also or instead interested in public engagement and website.
Thank you, Jenna. Sorry, one point of clarification. Is there a hand raise button for committee members, or do we just unmute for?
Just unmute. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you
It's
for
just like
clarifying.
if we were in person, you would not hand raise up there. You would just unmute and you could announce your name and then speak.
Great. Thank you, Loretta. Jenna, thank you for posing the question. Coming into this committee, I would like to participate in the subcommittees, and really, my interest is strongly with education. If that were an opportunity that I could participate in.
So the subcommittee right now for Nurse Midwifery Education comes with Rebecca DeSantis and Kenneth James. Rebecca's not on the meeting today. And so, and they're limited to 2 people. So we could not add you to that. We would have to swap somebody out. And so if you're wanting to join the education subcommittee, it would us to agendize that and make sure that Rebecca and both Kenneth are both here. I know Kenneth, you are. And that way there can be a discussion about whether or not Rebecca would want to transfer out of that. The public engagement and website is the vacancy right now. So you could choose to join that, or you could wait and we would agendize this to allow her that conversation to include Rebecca. And if after it's agendized and Rebecca doesn't show up, then at least it's agendized, Rebecca does have an awareness, and the committee could move forward without that. But there would have been no way for Rebecca to know that this was going to be discussed and that she could possibly be replaced today, because that's not agendized.
What
Dr.
about-
James, did you have a comment?
I said, what about if I offer a swap? Because she's obviously highly qualified. If that's something.
This is Reza. I think that's an option. I think, I mean, if the committee as a whole, voting members here who have a quorum wanted to force a swap with our absent member, I think that's within the purview as well. I hear what Lori is saying about giving her an opportunity. Yeah, what Dr. James just proposed.
I'm happy to swap onto a different committee and allow her to be on that education committee, as again, she is highly qualified, probably more than most of us, or at least myself.
And so then
If
Kenneth,
she would like that.
yeah, would you go to the public engagement and website, Kenneth? Because there's, again,
Sure, 100%.
so that could be a motion that could be made today.
I make a motion to add Kim Doe to the Nurse Midwifery Education Subcommittee and to transfer Dr. Kenneth James to the Public Engagement and Website Committee, effective immediately.
Second.
So you could do a public comment in a motion right now if you, in a vote if you wanted to, or we can continue the report out and take and finish this agenda item and do a public comment all at once.
Let's do that.
Okay.
All right. Is there any subcommittee who would like to report out first? Is there any subcommittee with a report out?
Yes.
So public engagement and website was non-functional. Nurse midwifery scope of practice did not meet. Regulations?
I can report out on regulations, and Dr. James can add to it. I did meet separately, well, twice. We met with the regulations with Miss Loretta and legal counsel, just to clarify on what can be done. I'm new to the regulations committee, but what can be done under this subcommittee and what the NMAC can and can't do. So that was a lot of clarification also in terms of what Ruth Milkey was asking. And then I did also meet with Dr. James. We wanted to get an idea in terms of, similar to what Ruth was asking, what percentage of midwives are employed in a hospital versus a private independent practice. Through conversation, we found out that that is not something that the BRN is able to provide us information with, which sort of led to me and Dr. James coming up with wanting to know, did the regulatory changes that have been in effect since 2023, 2024 result in, really, I thought it was actually earlier than that, but result in any changes in practice and anything that can be measured. So how we go about getting that information, I guess, is what we would propose adding on the agenda. Whether we can, do we need approval to reach out to HCAI or CDPH for this workforce data information, and how we would go about doing that. But basically that is where we are with our planning stage. I don't know if that's
So I'll
clear.
provide some clarification now that we have a ability to have a broader discussion on this. So when you're looking at regulations, regulations can be written to support the statutory language that we have. It cannot expand the statutory language or alter the statutory language. So when you guys are talking about a regulatory subcommittee, you are really to review the regulations that we have right now, saying, are those still clear? Do those need updated? Do they reflect the statute? Because regulations are put in place to provide clarification or a policy of some sort to implement the statutory language. When you're looking at scope of practice, this is where it becomes a kind of an area that we have to be careful with within the BRN. BRN is a licensing and enforcement regulatory agency, right? So our entire focus through that licensing enforcement is for protection of the public. The way that the BRN is set up, that public protection is the consumer of those services. So I know that's kind of an abnormal way to look at it when you are actually a licensee. When you're looking at expanding or changing scope of practice, that cannot be managed through the BRN. That has to be managed through your organizations like CNMA, et cetera. And that has to go through the legislative route. We have to maintain that separate jurisdiction and focus completely, because anytime there is blurring of those lines, it is then questioned on whether or not the BRN is truly serving the interest of public protection and not promotion of the profession. And so that's where we have to be very clear within those lines. And so the other thing that happens with this is we are a licensing and enforcement. We are not a employer. And so employment data is not something that we collect or obtain. We do have a reporting process where we do contract with the University of UCSF, sorry. We do a workforce survey, and we have in the past done workforce surveys around APRN practice and workforce, and that could be something that we explore here, is doing some sort of a study to get that information and truly just report that out. But that is something that we also have to stay separate, because we do not get involved in employment laws, any kind of union issues, any kind of utilizing within healthcare agencies, because we do not have any authority over healthcare facilities, et cetera. That is completely outside of our jurisdiction. So with this regulatory subcommittee, the content that you're talking about, which is seeing whether workforce has changed, doesn't necessarily fall underneath that regulatory subcommittee, because the regulations are made specifically to implement or provide clarification of the statutory language that we have. So if you're looking at having this maybe fall under a subcommittee, this may be best managed through the Nurse Midwifery Scope of Practice subcommittee, because that might be where that needs to live, to have more discussion around that. And if something is discovered where there is an issue that needs to be addressed, we could, in that subcommittee, have conversation where they might need to seek a legislative fix outside of BRN. And so that does happen commonly within some of our subcommittee discussions dealing with the various advanced practice groups.
I have a follow-up question about the question Lilith posed around how to communicate between the NMAC and HCI or other agencies with queries. What's the right process? Who leads that communication and follow through?
As part of this subcommittee and as part of the members of the advisory committee, you guys are allowed to speak with whoever you want, as long as you're not speaking with your advisory group people here. So you guys can make those reach out to HCI, to CDPH, to any organization that you guys want. You guys have the ability to make those connections, to have those conversations. If you're unsure of who or what and such, when we're having our meetings, you can reach out to Macaulay, you can reach out to myself, you can reach out directly to Reza, and we can set up meetings. We can have discussions on who might be of a person that you could reach out to, and we can give you that information for you guys to do the work of your advisory committee. There is a reason why board staff are not on these committees. It's because you guys are the licensees. You guys are the ones that are in practice, and you guys are the ones that bring these recommendations to our board versus our board staff doing that. And so, but we're willing to assist you in providing kind of, hey, this is where this lives. This is where that lives. I can reach out and get a contact for you, etc. But that is not something that we would be doing in-house with BRN staff.
I just wanted to add something real quickly to that. This is Reza. It's a good question. As Lori said, generally, our subcommittees, that the whole point is for them to be able to do research and have discussions and things offline, meaning in between these meetings that are relatively infrequent. So absolutely, you can. The one kind of line that I would draw is that, and this kind of hopefully goes without saying, but you know, any representations on behalf of the BRN, you know, stating this is how the BRN sees this and those kind of things, it should go without saying. We don't want our subcommittee members, nothing against any single one of you, but those kind of things we need to have some control over exactly what's said. And depending on what's said, it could be spot on or it could be problematic. But on the other side of things, you reaching out to conduct research and get data or ask questions, things like that, totally fine. We totally support that. And as Lori said, can if you need kind of some help getting steered in the right direction, we're here for that. So just that little caveat.
A quick follow-up to Reza's caveat is we then need to make sure that we report it out in the subcommittee report out so that the public is aware of what is happening in between meetings with the subcommittee. It has to go that full circle so that there is that transparency, there is public awareness, and then if there is a decision to be made within the advisory committee, the subcommittee reports out and the entire advisory committee has the ability to have conversation, have discussion, and make a vote and a motion on that.
That actually brings up a question for me, which is how can subcommittees communicate outside of a meeting, if at all, which just doesn't sound like we can. And I ask because from the beginning, I was very confused why we split scope and regulations into two different subcommittees since they're so intertwined. And it sounds like the reg group can identify issues that need to be clarified by the scope group, and the scope group can identify issues that potentially need to be addressed with future regulation. And so given that we only meet twice a year, how can we move forward in those committees more expeditiously in communication or reciprocation?
So I'll try to provide additional clarification. They don't overlap necessarily. And so that's, I was not clear enough in that to begin with, is what it sounds like. So I want to take a minute to try to make that clarification again. Nurse midwifery scope of practice is set in legislation and will be put forth in our statutes. You would find it in our business professions code. So scope of practice does not live within regulations. Scope of practice lives within the legislative process, if that's going to be changed or altered or expanded. And the statutory language that comes from when a bill is introduced and passed and signed into law, if there is clarification that needs to be done, we could do that if it's just kind of putting it out through an FAQ, which is later on in our agenda item, or if it needs specific regulations to implement that. If we need specific regulations to clarify something that is in statute, or if in the bill language and ultimately the law, it says as determined by the board. Well, then the board has to determine that, and that determination is done through regulations. So the scope of practice is completely separate from the regulatory process because it is done through the legislative process and kind of looking at that. Now, if there is an overlap, if that is identified, that has to be agendized and that has to be discussed in this open forum because you would have 4 people meeting.
Right.
And we cannot have that, right?
Right.
So that is why these subcommittees are limited to 2. Those subcommittees, so if Jenna and Ruth want to have a conversation every day, all day, you guys can. You just report it out at the committee meeting. What Jenna and Ruth can't do is you guys cannot meet with James. You cannot meet with Lilith, Rebecca, or Kenneth, right? So that is when you start to infringe on the possibility of violating any kind of Bagley-Keene provisions where we do all of our work in an open, publicly noticed forum. So we don't want any chance of constituting a quorum, which is why you guys cannot talk subcommittee to subcommittee unless we agendaize it here. If we agendaize it here as we're doing today, you guys can talk. subcommittee to subcommittee if it's related to report outs. If it's a specific item that you guys want to discuss, we can agendaize that specific item so the public knows to show up, so that we can have those conversations so you guys can actually do more in-depth work as an advisory committee so that these subcommittees can overlap and share information.
Got it. I think we were actually saying the same thing about how the spheres of responsibility are separate but inform each other. And I understand that we are not communicating between subcommittees outside of this meeting. And so I guess the question I have is, does the regulation committee want to suggest that the scope subcommittee tackles this? Or do we want to potentially revisit how we've divided up the subcommittees? Does anyone have any comments on that?
Real quick, this is Reza. I just want to say, I think that's a good question. There is, I think, it seems that there's kind of an understanding of like, there is at least a possibility of some overlap, and to the extent there is anything that the BRN can do about scope via regulations and rulemaking, there's certainly an overlap there. I mean, we have a regulation that specifically is about scope of practice, but Lori's point, I think, is still valid that by and large, our scope is dictated to us by the actual legislature. That being said, I think if those on the, let's say, scope of practice subcommittee, or it could be any specific, topic that we have a subcommittee on, if they are discussing a specific scope of practice issue and think there really is room for regulations here, they can still within their subcommittee discuss the possibility of regulations and kind of brainstorm what those ideas are and what it would look like, or what changes might be made to the current regulations. So those in the, say, scope of practice subcommittee don't have to exclude fully, any thought of regulations from their thought processes and discussions within their subcommittees, just like any individual committee member is not siloed in their thought processes, at least in between meetings, to whatever they're assigned to. If you're assigned to a particular subcommittee, you can still think about the topics of all the other subcommittees. You can't talk about them amongst yourselves in between meetings, but you can still kind of continue to think about it. And that way we're, taking full advantage of everybody's experience and expertise and not totally siloing you. But that said, so if those on the scope subcommittee have ideas about regulatory changes, you can think about that and talk about it internally in your subcommittee, and then bring it to a public committee meeting where it's just agendized and discussed more fully, and you let the regs subcommittee know, what the thoughts are. And depending on what it is and where it's at in the process, it may be something that is kind of handed off to the regs subcommittee, or that kind of, where it goes from there will be determined kind of case by case. But also keep in mind the rulemaking process is lengthy, and we have board staff who do, who are primarily responsible for working on that stuff, but they also might be tasked with working with our regulations subcommittee as a reg package is kind of being developed and put together. That could be something. It depends on the reg package and what it is, but that might be something that's kind of appropriate to send to the reg subcommittee, even if it relates to scope. Once that rulemaking package is kind of off and running, it might land in the rulemaking subcommittee.
By that same kind of line of thinking, then, could not the subcommittee on regulations decide that in order to inform their thoughts about whether new regulations should be proposed, that they could do background information gathering, including workforce data, if they felt like that was important to inform their potential comment on future regulations? I guess I'm not understanding why they couldn't just continue as they have, hearing you talk about it.
So the question is, could the regulations subcommittee do
Yeah, it
like
sounded like maybe I
research,
misunderstood that when Lilith was
specific
talking
scope, and
about the activity of her group, that it was suggested that that was actually more aligned with the midwifery scope of practice subcommittee. But if all they're seeking is data to inform future regulations, I guess I'm asking whether that's true.
for my part, I think that'd be fine. I don't like I think kind of the gist of what I was saying earlier, a couple of things. For one thing, there's kind of a hard line drawn between communication among subcommittees. That's kind of in between, you know, these meetings. That's an easy one to kind of draw a hard line on. As far as, you know, beyond that, I think the gist of what I was saying is I don't draw, you know, real solid concrete lines that limit our subcommittee, especially one that's pretty general and broad like regulations.
Great. Okay.
So, yeah.
Lilith, did that make sense? Any thoughts?
The last thing I'll say is,
Sorry, Raza.
you know, our regulations subcommittee, I think the general point is I don't limit any subcommittee too much, but it's kind of up to the subcommittee members and maybe potentially the committee itself to prioritize and kind of designate what gets worked on first. So if the rulemaking subcommittee doesn't have something else that's a higher priority and wants to do, you know, that kind of research and reach outs and stuff, fine. If the committee itself wants to direct the subcommittee, it can. If it wants to kind of leave it to their discretion, that's fine too. So yeah, that's it.
I have two comments. First, I would like to make sure the committee is aware that the California Healthcare Foundation partnered with UCSF Health Force and produced a nurse midwifery and licensed midwifery workforce report. There are several snapshots available on the CHCF webpage that provide results from survey data conducted in 2022. Within that data is place of employment. So I think, Lilith, one of your questions was how many were employed by hospitals, private practices, et cetera. That data is included there. It doesn't show the trend that I think you're after, but you at least have that snapshot. My second comment is that in the September 2024 NMAC minutes, it's noted that Holly Smith from the California Nurse Midwives Association recommended that the NMAC look at developing regulations for the statute in our scope of practice language, enabling nurse midwives to provide care for common gynecologic conditions outside of pregnancy. From what I can tell in those minutes, it was suggested that further regulation may be necessary to specify a bit more what that includes, the common gynecologic conditions outside of pregnancy, because that is newer statutory language. So I think my request would be that the regulations subcommittee consider that if it's not already on your agenda, and if it please everybody to report back at our next meeting on for recommendations and next steps on how to handle that.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. I was actually thinking about the same thing last night, because the updated language refers to the core competencies established by ACNM or its successor, which of course includes lifespan health. But when you look at the actual specific language, it does appear that even the care of common gynecological conditions could be construed to be just in the childbearing year, antenatal, intrapartum, and postpartum. Which I don't believe was the intention, and I don't believe that the current language actually precludes lifelong care, but I think Holly's point was we could make that more explicitly clear as well.
I agree to that, and that's something we can work on. I think it also touches on what Paris Malouf was saying at the beginning in terms of what she was saying, can we update our Q&A portion to include what isn't in midwifery scope? But I think there kind of go together, right? Like a lot of what she was saying can be worked on the regulatory side.
Okay, so at this point, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, the regulations subcommittee is going to continue exploring this and not defer to the scope subcommittee. And in the next meeting, if there's something that you would like to recommend or task to the scope subcommittee, we can do that at the next meeting after it's agendized. Is that correct?
I think so.
Okay.
Dr. James, do you have something to add or clarify?
No, sounds good to me.
Okay. And just secondly, on that note, how SB 667 applies to each group of midwives, whether they're hospital employed midwives or private or and independent practice midwives. I'm not sure if that's something that we also add to our Q&A portion when we get to that part, because to me, I guess I'm a little confused in terms of what the regulations committee or what the NMAC can regulate on.
We have an entire process for that. So again, I'm going to encourage you guys to set up meetings with us. Reza, myself, Macaulay, we can bring in our chief of ledge, Marissa. If she, just for full transparency, she's has some scheduled time off for the next few months. But she does plan to return in September, after juggling being a brand new mom. So it doesn't mean that things will stop. It just means that we will be kind of moving forward, but we won't have her as expert during that time. When we have these meetings, we can have discussions on that regulatory process. We can also agendaize and discuss the regulatory process so that we can be very clear on how this happens, how it's reviewed, who the different various levels of review, and who determines whether or not it's supported in statute, because everything that goes in regulations must be supported in statute. We must have evidence as to why we're doing this, and then it has to ultimately approved by the Office of Administrative Law. That is a very, very prescribed process that we have to follow, and it ultimately lands at that approval process with Office of Administrative Law. So in these subcommittees, if you guys need that information, we are happy to meet with you. We're happy to provide these information. We're happy to have these kind of rabbit hole discussions where we can kind of take apart every single piece, and we can set them up, on a frequent basis. If you wanted to meet, once a month or every other week, we meet with some regulatory groups that are within our other advisory committees every other week so that we can have these discussions and work through the process. We're very happy to do that. The Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee has not been a committee that within their subcommittees have been doing those reach outs to get those scheduled to have us participate in that. So that's why I'm definitely encouraging you guys to make those reach outs, to be responsive to our emails so that we can jump in and help you guys out so that you guys do see progress and movement. We really want to facilitate that, but I can't make you guys fit that into your work, right? We know that you guys are working and have a full-time job and sometimes more than full-time jobs out there. So we want to be here as a resource to you.
Thank you for that. In the interest of time, I'm wondering if we can move
Please let
ahead
me
and
finish,
see if
Jenna,
there's
1 second, because I
sorry.
have to
Yes.
get this directed. Thank you. With the FAQs, and we're looking at moving into that one, that can be worked offline as well with the public engagement and website, because that FAQs does live on our website. So that might be something, Kenneth, in the future when we're scheduling these meetings out, that you have that in the back of your head, that might be something that you want to work on in your subcommittee as well. And then we can assist you with that also.
Great. Any further questions on that? Okay. Does the Nurse Midwifery Education Subcommittee have a report out for us today?
No, nothing new.
Okay. And I think with that, we can open it to public comment. And I'm actually going to step aside for 1 second. Too much coffee.
Okay, and just reminding, we do have a motion on the table, and that is for the assignment and reassignment of the subcommittee members. So just remember that when we do come back, we will have to take a roll call vote on that.
We're going to just take a few minute break for folks rather than, looks like a couple of our members have dropped off.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah, to do a couple minute break.
3 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes.
10:35.
The chair is not
10:33,
here to make that
10:38.
motion. So I think we will let's just come back at 10:40. That's 6 minutes from now. Thank you guys. We'll reconvene at 10:40. And Jenna, while you stepped away, we did go ahead and do a 6 minute break. And so we will be back at 10:40. Hey, Jenna, when it is time to start, and as soon as you can, we will have to do another roll call vote, roll call to establish a quorum, not a roll call vote, sorry.
Okay, so let's resume our meeting and take a roll call. Dr. James.
Back.
Kim.
Here.
Lilith. Don't hear Lilith yet.
I am back. Sorry.
Oh, great.
I didn't unmute.
And Dr. Milky.
I'm here. Yeah.
Great. All right, and I believe we had tried to open this up for public comment, including the motion to move Dr. James to Public Engagement Website Subcommittee and add Kim Doe to the Nurse Midwifery Education Subcommittee.
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Harris Maloof Burry would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Thank you. So, representing the California Nurse Midwives Association, I want to point out how we have effectively spent the first hour and 42 minutes of the 2-hour-long meeting getting nothing done other than talking about how we could make changes if we were going to make changes. These laws have been passed for years, and the website that our employers go to. So for example, Sutter, where I'm one of the leads, we're trying to get changes in our health systems policies updated, and they reference the BRN's website. And the BRN's website still says that we require standardized procedures, still says a whole lot of outdated things that I have sent repeated emails and received zero response from Loretta or from Reza on this to this regard. With regard to whether there is a need for some sort of oversight of communications from the public regarding NMAC and nurse midwifery regulation, yes, there is, because I'm getting zero response. I know that things take time, but this meeting is a perfect example of how this does not work. Every meeting that I've attended, we spend the entire meeting talking about how things could get done if we were going to get them done, but nothing has gotten done. Nothing has gotten done, and this is holding up our practice in real life in a state where we do not have enough healthcare providers, where we are trying to have everyone work at the top of their licensure, experience, and training. But this is years out of date.
Thank you for your comment, Harris. I believe we're going to address some of that in the next agenda item.
Thank you for your comment. Committee Chair Batista, there are no other public requests for comments on the WebEx. We have no in-person representation in our location in BRN HQ. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And now we will take a roll call vote for the motion to change the subcommittees as previously stated. Dr. Milky.
Wait, did we get it? Do we need a second? No.
I think
We
already made a motion before and we were waiting to vote on it for public comment.
We're just voting.
If I'm not
Okay.
mistaken.
So we're just voting. Aye.
Okay. Lilith.
I approve.
Kim.
Aye.
And Dr. James.
Approve.
And I also vote to approve. So the motion is passed. The subcommittee membership will change as discussed. Moving on to the next agenda item, thankfully there's very little to discuss, given that there have been no disciplinary actions in 2025, according to the meeting minutes that we have received. Is there any discussion needed about this at this time? Hearing no comments, we can open it up to the public. Do we have to open it up to the public? Yeah, for comment on this agenda item and the report received as meeting materials.
You technically do. I think you have to open it up at the time that it's discussed or action is taken. This isn't really being discussed. So if you want to open it up, go ahead. If not, I think you could combine this and the next agenda item, and the next public comment would allow for
Let's do
comment
that.
on 6 also. If there's really no discussion on the committee, I think you can.
Great. Then let's go ahead and move
For
to the next
public, keep in
agenda
mind the next
item.
time it's open for public comment, you can circle back to 6.0 as well.
Okay. So the 7.0 is, I think, where I had hoped that the meat of the discussion would be today, but we had a lot to say previously. So I am wondering if the committee members are available to stay 15 minutes later if we want to, if necessary for this discussion. And I would therefore make a motion to extend the meeting for this purpose. Is that a possibility?
I am able to stay.
Yeah, I don't think you need a motion to do
Okay.
that. I think, but also I can stay, but we've got a number of other people besides our committee. We want to make sure.
I bet.
It's a question
Keep
that
in mind, there's
all
another
of us
committee
or
meeting
just
later.
people on a subcommittee?
It would be a quorum.
Quorum,
if you
I
guys were going to
believe.
Take
The
an
quorum,
action.
okay.
You would have to have a
I mean,
quorum.
I am happy to attend if that helps the quorum question.
All right, well, let's just see what we can do. But basically, we have received repeated communications from the CNMA and their representatives requesting website updates. And we briefly went through the updates requested by email in our last meeting. It appears that as of this morning, but possibly not yesterday, almost everything has been updated with the exception of the FAQs. Loretta, the website updates were going to be under your team's preview per the last meeting minutes. Were you able to conduct those? Am I correct that those have now been updated?
When we received those, we did do as many updates as we can on that. As you guys are very much aware, you guys did not have an operating public engagement and website subcommittee. Previously, we were able to work with Mary Kay, I believe, through that one, and we got a lot updated on the website with her assistance. Where the FAQs lives right now is with me and Marissa, the chief of Ledge. And so we were opening that up. We were looking at that. We were seeing what we could update that would not be deemed underground regulations, right? So we have to be careful when we're updating that to make sure that it's not directly interpreting or providing guidance or doing anything that should be done through the regulatory route. And so that is in that review process. Now that we do have a operating subcommittee on public engagement and website, I am hoping that Dr. James will be able to assist us in more of that so that we can continue to have those updates done to our website and provide that clarification.
Great. Well, of the original list, it looks like the only website change that wasn't enacted was the authorization for RNs to dispense drugs and devices, and the reference to standardized procedure or protocol required of CNMs needs to be removed. And so I can send that to Macaulay, who can distribute it to James.
And just so you're aware, it may not be removed fully, it would be clarified, right?
Perfect.
And so that would probably mention that section in our business professions code that Paris did bring up.
Yep.
Where we would reference this section that is Business Professions Code 2746.5 B1, where we would change out the use of standardized procedures and talk about now referencing the use of policies and protocols that are mutually agreed upon with the physician and surgeon, and delineate the parameters for the consultation, collaboration, referral, and transfer of patient care, and that they're both signed. So we do have to provide that additional guidance, letting them know that the provisions under 2746.5A doesn't even require that. And there's even a section down under there that says K, where it says this section shall not be construed to require a nurse midwife to have mutually agreed upon signed policies and protocols for provisions of the services described in subdivision A. So we would not remove that, but we would update that to include new language.
1725.1 of BMP also needs clarification that standardized procedures are no longer required, according to the website has an outdated version.
And you're saying 17, what
1725.1 of BMP needs to be amended for SB 667.
Find that. I'm sorry, I'm looking.
I think that it is in section B, mid paragraph.
And you're saying 17 in the BNP? Are you meaning the California Code of Regulations potentially?
Let me see. It's
No,
it's the link that Paris gave us. It's not the link. It's not what you were just describing. It's a different section, and it's in the email. And it
2725.1.
Correct, section B.
Okay, sorry, 27.
No, it's okay. I don't think it warrants a whole lot of discussion. It's just another area of the website that's been identified as needing an update. So we can refer back to the written materials reviewed at our last meeting for to keep us on track with that regard. But I would like to spend some time discussing actual changes to the FAQs, since we were not able to move forward given the vacancy on our website and public engagement committee.
Definitely. One point, just really quick, is I wanted to make sure that on 2725.1B, you're referencing statutory language that needs updated.
It looks like it's a link to a BRN publication entitled Registered Nurses Authorization for RNs to Dispense Drugs and Devices on the Order of an NP, CNM, or PA. And in the first section, section B, it references that CNMs require standardized procedures. And it probably says that elsewhere as well, but
sure it does.
That's what I found right off the bat. Yep. So moving forward to the FAQs, I'm wondering if we could pull them up to look at for this discussion, if that would be helpful.
And excuse me, Lilith is an attendee. She tried to get back into the meeting. Can somebody let her in to the...
Oh, promote her?
Promote her, yes. She was demoted.
And she has been promoted. It looks like
Lilith
she's joined by phone.
Lilith is there. She's on her phone now.
Okay, Lilith, we will need you on camera if you're able to. That is a requirement for the provisions of Bagley-Keene. Are you able to continue to be on camera?
I can do camera. I just, when I switched to my phone, it moved me out. So yes, I'm and it should be working now. Do you guys see me? Okay. All right.
Okay. And then board moderator, are you able to share the FAQs that are in the meeting materials, or would you like me to share? Okay, I'm not hearing, so I will go ahead and share.
Thank you.
And if they want to steal it back, they absolutely can.
So we have had, like I said, outreach about the number of places that our FAQ document needs to be updated to reflect SB 667. And can we propose changes and then make a motion to accept all those changes in mass?
That sounds reasonable.
Okay. So it looks to me, and please interrupt me at any time as I start walking through this, but we probably need to add some language in the first paragraph to explain that this also includes updates from SB 667. So maybe that last sentence could be amended to read, and updates later provided by SB 667.
In the discussion that I've had with other board staff, we were suggesting just to drop the bill language out of this and just saying frequently asked questions related to midwifery practice, and just leave it at that. And we would not
effective as of now.
That back. That way we can just continue to build this as a living document on our website as needed.
That sounds reasonable. Any comments on that? All right, the first section that was identified as needing updates is the section with the question, must CNMs be supervised by a physician to provide care for patients who fall out of the defined low-risk scope? And that needs to be updated to reflect that SB 667 further clarified CNMs do not need to be employed in the same practice or working at the same sites with physicians in order to consult and collaborate with them. And that could be just a standalone last sentence added there. Does that make sense to folks? And of course, this is going to require legal review to make sure this is accurate and supported. But this is the layperson's understanding.
I think I hear you typing in the background. Are you typing this up to send? Oh, okay. I'm doing my best to get the notes down as well, but
I do have it in writing already.
Okay.
So I can send my proposed language afterwards that I'm reading to you now.
And then we do have board staff that is also taking notes on the document of the proposed changes.
Great. Looks like to me the next question that needs updating is, are CNMs required to have physician supervision for furnishing medications? And I think we can just probably remove the last sentence. Because SB 667 basically removes all references to standardized procedures and patient-specific protocols.
So I will have to provide some additional clarification here that you will find on review, is that the furnishing license still does carry a 4:1 ratio at this point. And the furnishing license is still required for DEA, Schedule 2 and such. So we'll just have to put that through legal review to make sure that we're in compliance with that and that that's not being interpreted incorrectly.
Right. Similarly, the next one.
I have a point of clarification.
Oh, sorry. Was there
Jenna,
a comment on the last
I
one?
apologize. Just say, Lori, could you repeat what you just said? That the ratio is still in place for the furnishing?
So according to the furnishing process that is still in statute, there may still be a requirement for that to occur with a 4:1 ratio. We will have to check to make sure that wasn't something that was omitted. That was a process that was brought up with the nurse practitioners. And so what we had to do was just do a legal review to ensure that. And so all I'm saying at this point is I think we will have to look at it just to make sure that that is not something that was missed. It may be just for NPs, but we want to make in an abundance of clarity to make sure that that's not something that's missed, because with the passing of AB 890, for NPs, that was something that was missed. So I want to go back and do a review to make sure that that wasn't something that was missed.
Thank you. Great question, Kim. My understanding is that it was not missed, that it has been removed for midwives, but we'll really appreciate that clarity and would also potentially suggest that the regulations subcommittee make note to follow up on that legal review to make sure there's no changes needed. All right, for the next one, I propose adding or patient-specific protocols after procedures in the question. And then amending the response to read standard procedures and patient-specific protocols are no longer required for furnishing drugs or devices. Then removing point 1 and adding language that reflects SB 667, which could read something like, a certified nurse midwife is required to furnish or order a Schedule 2 or 3 controlled substance pursuant to policies and protocols that are mutually agreed upon with a physician, which are also required for furnishing or ordering drugs or devices for services other than attending cases of low-risk pregnancy, childbirth, or providing prenatal, intrapartum, and postpartum care as specified. That's a direct quote from the bill. We may not need to include that. I also added a suggested sentence. SB 667 defines CNMs as a prescriber and specifically permits CNMs to dispense drugs when attending cases of low-risk pregnancy, blah, blah, blah. And gynecologic conditions are included in that particular scope language. That's the last, or sorry, in that particular bill's language. It's the last paragraph, section 1 of SB 667. I am seeing people's confused faces, and I'm really apologizing for the method at which we're going through updating the FAQs. This is just the only thing that I could come up with that wasn't going to delay it another 6 months. So thank you for indulging this process. Did anyone understand what I just said? Any comments on the updates to that one?
I think, again, just to stay consistent with the furnishing aspect, we will do a legal review just to make sure, because there's so many things. It touches pharmacy law, it touches the DEA, it touches the our laws. So we just want to make sure that there's no overlap that is not considered to have any unintended consequences. So we'll just continue to have a very thorough review of that process specifically.
Thank you. And to that end, I would propose removing the next 2 questions and answers altogether, because they appear to no longer be applicable. And then I propose here, are there specific requirements?
Hang on one sec. I got lost when Lori was scrolling through it. So Jenna mentioned the next 2, her suggestion is to strike the question and answer. So we're referring to what are the required components and when is a patient-specific protocol necessary. Those are the 2?
Yeah, and of course, pending legal review. And then I am proposing to change the next question to be, are there specific prerequisites for CNMs who furnish drugs or devices? And I suggest striking point 3 and making number 4 become number 3. Does that make sense? Pending legal review, that's accurate interpretation, or not interpretation, but accurate language.
It's very clear. We will, as part of that review process, ensure that this is still something that pharmacy law, because we're talking about with a pharmacist, right? To make sure there's nothing that is needed to provide clarification for that. If there is, we would update that to reflect that here, so that if there is uncertainty with licensed pharmacists, that they know where to come to get that clarified right here, and this would be a consistent location.
Great.
If
It wouldn't be a
once we do
standardized
that
procedure,
review,
but they could certainly
yeah,
see a policy.
we would
Mhm.
update to whatever that would need to be. So we would reach out to pharmacy to make sure.
Okay. And then in light of SB 667, it appears that potentially several new FAQs would be indicated. And so I would like to review them now, assuming people are able to continue. This probably will only take another 5 minutes or so, unless there's a lot of discussion.
Jenna, before we move on to another FAQ, I had a comment on the one in front of us.
Yeah.
Relatively minor edit that needs to be made. CNM is a trademarked credential by the American Midwifery Certification Board. As you all know, California does not require national certification for state licensure. I do believe that the CNM abbreviation here needs to be updated to NMW, which is more consistently used by the BRN to reference California state licensees.
Good point. Similarly, there's a typo in nurse midwife in the middle of the nurse midwifery scope summary on the advanced practice and public health nurse certification page that I'll provide in writing.
Thank you. We'll grab that. Thank you.
There is also a part that says ANCM instead of ACNM.
Mm-hmm.
Under subdivision A also points to core competencies by ANCM. It should be ACNM.
Perfect. And actually, I misspoke. There was one more existing FAQ that probably needs updating status post SB 667, and that is, can I directly procure drugs and devices? I suggest that we add a sentence to the end of that answer. Oops, scroll back up. Yeah. I think it might be the last one. Oh no, keep going. It's it says, can I directly, here we go. This one, can I directly procure? I believe a sentence at the end stating something like SB 667 clarified that CNMs may serve as laboratory directors in facilities that only perform clinical laboratory tests classified as waived under the CLIA amendments of 1988, or provider performed microscopy within the nurse midwifery scope of practice. And that again is basically directly lifted from SB 667.
So the only thing that on that language that I would suggest that we alter is not referencing the bill, because the bill no longer lives. We would reference the business professions code where that now currently lives, because that's where we really want all stakeholders to reference directly back to the law at all times. And so we will put that in there with a link back to the business professions code.
Perfect. Any comments on that? That has been an issue raised as a barrier to practice to our full scope. So I think clarifying that language on this FAQ will be super helpful.
And then Jenna, just for clarification, you are sending us the document that you're referencing.
I will.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. Macaulay just reached out. She's like, I need that document.
Yeah, and I'm reading it verbatim, so it can be in the minutes or in the video.
Perfect. And then I did stop sharing because you were talking about this is a new
Yeah. So there were a
section.
couple. The ones that were raised by stakeholders previously in prior meetings and by email since our last meeting were hospital privileges. So I propose a question: can nurse midwives hold hospital privileges without physician supervision? And the answer would be yes. Hospitals may grant admission and discharge privileges to nurse midwives consistent with CNM scope of practice and hospital bylaws. And again, that's straight out of SB 266.
We might be able to do that. We might have to reference them to CDPH, to the law that is there. So we can do something in that manner. It may not be that specific language, but we will try to be as close to that as possible.
Great. Another question that I propose based on stakeholder feedback. Can a nurse midwife provide abortion services?
So that is something we could put in there because we do cover that in our business professions code.
Great. My proposed answer is yes. Effective January 2023, CNMs may provide first trimester abortion care without physician supervision and without standardized procedures. This is further reinforced under BMP subsection 2746.6. And it was SB 1375 that initially gave CNMs this ability. Comments on that? Hearing none, I will propose another new fact, which is Holly Smith suggested that we consider in our last meeting adding information about disability claims. And that is specifically addressed in SB 667. And so I propose adding the question, can a nurse midwife certify disability claims? With the proposed answer, yes. Nurse midwives may certify medical disability if the diagnosis condition is within the certified nurse midwifery scope of practice, which includes APIP, postpartum, intraconception, and family planning needs. SB 667 also defines specifically nurse midwives as practitioners relating to the scope of their professional license. I know that this is really also an EDD policy, but I thought that this proposed language could at least reflect the BRN's position.
Potentially. So that one there will need, again, a more in-depth legal review on that one. There was similar circumstances that popped up with nurse practitioners where they were considered a practitioner with us, but that hadn't been carried over to the other set of laws that it conflicted with. So they did have to have an update to that law to include them as providers. So as long as there is no conflict there, when we look at that, that is something that we can go ahead and update in FAQ. If we do find a conflict with that, we will let you know where that conflict lives and how that would need to be rectified to make that perfectly clear.
Wonderful. I think in a prior meeting when we actually had a presentation about disability, EDD indicated that they refer to the BRN website. So hopefully there will be no conflict. And then the final, comments on that. Anyone? All right. The final proposed FAQ, which I actually did not write, was suggested by Lilith today, and that was discussing any differential in impact of SB 667 on community versus hospital-based midwives. And so I would put it out to you guys whether you wanted to try to craft some language or task that to the website committee for future consideration.
I think what we'll have to do with that one is have a more in-depth conversation as to what that entails. It does look like it's kind of in this area that may not live within the jurisdiction of the BRN. If there is something that we think that we could post, it might be a link to a site that addresses that. But I don't know affirmatively that could be added to this FAQ. So we would just need to have a more in-depth conversation about that with legal and such to really kind of nail down specifically what you're trying to address here and see how we can address it with you guys.
Okay. So we'll revisit that at the next meeting with the understanding that there will be some clarification in the meantime, either by the scope or regulation subcommittees. And it might be time to revisit the idea that was floated previously about providing like a faux case study, like here's what collaboration and consultation would look like for a CNM in a community-based setting restricted to their low risk scope. Here's what it looks like when midwives are caring for both low risk and beyond low risk patients.
That's not typically something that we can do on our website. If that is handled by CNMA, we can maybe do a link to that website to highlight that, but that's not something that we would house on our website. Just to make that clear delineation of that. So.
Okay.
Again, and then just so I can really put the plea out, if the subcommittees are not meeting with us, we cannot progress this stuff forward. So please respond to the emails that are sent out. Please set up the meetings with us so that we can do the work in between the meetings to really help to facilitate so that things can get done. I hear Paris, I want to move these things forward. I want to update them just as quickly as anybody else. I know that our website needs this update, but we have to have the collaboration and the commitment from you guys as well to assist with this.
Right. Well, those were the things that I found to address based on our prior discussions and communications from stakeholders. Do people see anything else that needs to be updated in the FAQs pursuant to 667 or other regulatory language that has occurred since this was drafted? And I don't think it's been updated since or references nothing later than 2021.
And just so you know that once this is updated and legal is approved, we will post it on our website, and we could bring that back as an agenda item to show that it's done. It's not necessary, but that is an option. At any point that you guys do review this and see anything that's updated, please send an email to that NMAC box so that we can gather that and work with that as well. And so the motion here that would be required is for you guys to accept the changes as discussed pending legal review. And then if we get a second, we can go out to public comment and then do a vote.
Second.
Did somebody make a motion?
No, I move that we proceed with making the changes as suggested pending legal review to the FAQs.
I second.
Can I propose a addition and that we hear a report out at our next meeting about the status of these requested updates?
I second that.
Assuming Ruth is incorporating that into her motion.
For those taking the minutes, what I said with the addition of a report out at the next NMAC meeting.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, so we take public comment before we vote?
Yes.
Open it up to the public?
And then public comment is on for both items. Remember the prior item as well as this one? Correct?
6-0 and 7-0.
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Paris Maloof-Burry would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Thank you. Again, this is Paris. I want to share my gratitude for moving this through. This is much needed and very, very appreciated. I would like to request that we, perhaps via response to my multiple emails or in some other fashion, if that's deemed appropriate, I would like to be notified when the website updates have been made. The next NMAC meeting is 6 whole months away, and I would prefer to be able to move forward with updating our practices where I am the lead for our practice. And I, again, have been writing on response or on behalf of the work that I'm doing as a licensed certified nurse midwife, and waiting for those updates from the BRN. So if you need me to, I can send yet another email. I don't know if that's necessary, but I would love to be informed as to when these changes have taken place.
I have your email up. I've been working on it for the past couple weeks with our chief of ledge. As soon as it is done, I will respond it out to you with what has been updated.
I very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Committee Chair Shab Batista, there are no other requests for comments on the WebEx. We have no in-person representation in BRN HQ. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. And I believe the final agenda item is adjournment. I really appreciate you all staying a little bit extra, and I'm so grateful that we actually got through the FAQ updates. I feel very accomplished, and I hope you do too.
Did we do roll call vote?
Oh shoot, no. Roll call vote on the
Thank you.
proposed FAQ updates as read by Ruth as motioned by Ruth. Ruth, you vote. What's your vote? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yes, I am. Aye.
Great. Kim.
Approve.
Dr. James.
Approve.
And Lilith.
Approve.
And I also vote to approve, so the motion is passed.
Thank you.
And now we can adjourn.
That is correct.
Excellent.
So we will adjourn today at 11:23. Appreciate you guys for staying
Thank
late.
you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Good work, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.